How many people have experience with JavaScript? Cool, a couple people. So AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And here's the fast summary. Makes requests to the server without reloading the page and receives and works with data from the server. So client-side programming done on the client is done in JavaScript. And so you could, when you're building web applications, you could write code that's going to be like in your HTML page, and that code will execute on the client's machine. And so, like, one of the things I heard somebody say is we're going to push all the processing to the client, right? And they want to, you know, they're saying let's get as much processing off of our servers and have that as much as possible be done on the client's machine. And so, you know, you'd use JavaScript to do that. So the main thing I'm trying to say here is that JavaScript is where you do client is what you use to do client-side programming. So if you have code, and where would you use that? Like, how might you use that, right? Like JavaScript, just basic stuff would be like this. You know, and so I just have, like, you know, there's different elements here on the page, and as different events occur, I have JavaScript listening for that, and it'll change, you know, different things. Do you guys want the lights out? It'd be better. You want to hit the lights a little bit, right? So that's JavaScript right there. I kind of like that layout.
Despite the fact that AJAX got the word XML in it, it doesn't really use too much XML anymore.
Thank you.
XML as a format's dying in favor of JSON.
So here we have a document.querySelector, and so the document, you know, we have the document object model in HTML. And inside the document object model is a model, right, of the objects in a document, the document object model. So what are the objects that are inside this document? That's the model. And so that's basically like all of your nodes. And so you have your in HTML, this is a node, right? Here's one node, here's another node, here's another node, here's another node. And then I could give IDs or classes to my nodes, or I could select all of, you know, query selector. And so instead of a query selector, I could do query selector all, right? And that would select all of my paragraphs, you know, and then I want to do something to my paragraph. So you could use JavaScript to select nodes in your HTML. And so right here I'm selecting query selector, and this is to select by ID. So I'm selecting that. I'm saying, hey, right here, and then I'm adding a function to it. Tell me if or an event listener. Is that the better way to describe it? Event listener on click, right? And so when this is clicked, I want to run this function. So here's an event listener listening for a click on this stuff right here, right? And the function I'm going to run is make request, which is right there. And so when I run this page, right, there's that one thing, and so it's waiting for a click. And when I click it, right, okay, now I could run that other function. And it runs that other function. And so that other function, to do AJAX, right, I want to get a new XML HTTP request. And so that's just the way you do it. And you get this object, and you can call this whatever you want, obviously, right? Like XHR was what Caleb was calling it at boot camp. XML HTTP request, XHR. Right? So sometimes I refer to it as that. If you look at the documentation, anytime you do web stuff, you want to go to MDN. And so MDN is like the place you always go for web documentation. So here's MDN AJAX. And if you look at AJAX and MDN, that's not the one I want. Getting started, that's the one I want. If you look at it, like here's their simple example. And, you know, this was the line I had. Right there. This is the line they have. Right? That's their equivalent of me using that. Because the reason I'm only using this is I don't care about like older browsers.
Yeah, it's saying IE. So if you're using like IE6,
IE6 or whatever, then you need to do it like this, right? Like if you're still on IE6, you're not using my application. I don't. You could just go back to shooting squirrels outside your trailer in Alabama. So I just do that one. And then, like their simple example, right, has a lot more stuff going on. But the meat and potatoes is this stuff right here of AJAX. Function, make request, and so that's this right here. And where am I making? This is my own function I wrote, right? I'm passing in a URL, so I'm making a request of that URL, right? And to do that, I do these three things. And this is me. I wrote that, right? And here is AJAX. And HTTP request, so I have that object. On ready state change, alert contents. So when call alert contents function after receive server response. So on ready state change, right, is like listening for did the server respond. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
how would you say it?
The on ready state change. The ready state for the HTTP request, there's 4 levels of it. 1, I think, is just created. 2 is sent the results. No, 1 is just created. 2 is opened. 3 is sent request. And 4 is response received from server.
So ready state is part of that HTTP object thing. With that object that we create from XML HTTP request, right? And so ready state will have 4 ready states. Uninitialized, loading, loaded, interactive. We just want this one.
Yeah, when you hit 4, you got your response back from the server. There's not much point to you caring about the rest.
When you're sending a request, provide the name of the function that's designed to handle the response. So HTTP on ready state change. So when there's a ready state change, right, we're going to run this function. And when that function runs, so I just gave it a function, right? When that and this is interesting. It's not like that. We're not running the function, right? It's like that.
You're passing the entire function in.
Yeah, passing the whole function in. And then when we run this, we first check to see is ready state equal to 4. We don't care about any of these other states. Loading, loaded, interactive. We just want complete. And then if it's also a good request, right, like successful, then we could do HTTP request, which is our object, and get the response. So that's the text the server sent back to us. So that's the first thing in that function right here, is just to sort of listen for the ready state changes. Ready state. And then the next thing is just to make the request, right? So maybe it would have made more sense sequentially if I'd done this. Make the request, listen for the response. So open it. We're going to do a get to this URL, and then we're going to send the request and then listen for it. That makes more sense. We'll see if it still runs.
It should. JavaScript is single-threaded only, so it doesn't actually, calling open to prepare it and send is basically marking it ready to go. And then you're adding the event listener. It's not until your code is done that the web browser actually gets around to actually sending it.
Yeah, so it's fine.
Which is why if you make an infinite loop in JavaScript, it crashes your web page. Because it's stuck in your code and not actually getting around to the rest of the web page.
So this is where I get all like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And who wrote that book? Anybody know? No, I don't remember either. But I started wondering, like, why did I have to write this all in an anonymous self-executing function? Right, so here is my anonymous self-executing function. Like, why is that all wrapped in an anonymous self-executing function? That was my exact response. Like, are they trying to, like, contain variables here? But that's all that I got in my script tag, right? Are they doing some sort of closure, right? But I think, this would be global to my script with or without that. So I was like, how's it run without it? fine.
So the reason they put that in is if you got more than one script tag, JavaScript has got no global scope break between different script tags. So if you're importing some library and then you've got your own code and you've got one of your global variables that's the same name as one of the library variables, you'll overwrite that library variable. So if it's in an anonymous function, the scope of your variables in your anonymous function as opposed to the global namespace. So you won't have to worry about overwriting something important.
And then the next question I had, Zen mind, beginner's mind, is what the heck? Nested if statements? Looks like I could do that with an and. Just check them both and run it. Otherwise, no, right? Doesn't that seem the case? So instead of all this,
so the problem with that, though,
yeah, there you go. Go ahead, lay it out.
So the problem there is you want the else to be just if the status, if you want it to be, you've got two cases, ready state 4 and status 200, and ready state 4 and not status 200. So either case, you need that ready state 4. So if you move that into an and, then your else is connected to if it's not ready state 4.
Right.
As well,
And
which
so,
you want to do nothing if it's ready state
watch
4.
what happens. So that's there. Why is, oh, you know why? Because it's JavaScript.
Yes.
Like, why is my editor not liking that?
It's not a number.
Alright, so watch what happens when I run this. There was a problem with your request, 1. There was a problem with your request, 2. There was a, oh, no, cool, I'm a test. So we were getting those other states right here. Yeah. I went down that road. Like, I thought that would totally work, but no, because if one fails, right?
You're hitting ready state 2 and ready state 3.
Yeah.
And then finally hitting the 4.
It runs to else. There we go. So bye-bye to that. I was trying to make this as simple as possible, this code. Make everything as simple as possible and not simpler. It's one of my favorite quotes. Have I shared that one with you guys? You know who said it? Einstein. Do you know what Einstein's name means in Germany? One beer. That's his name, Einstein. He's named one beer. One of the greatest physicists of all times is named one beer.
Not one stone. Stein.
Don't ruin this for me. That's awesome. I thought Stein was a beer. I thought Stein was a beer. Isn't a Stein a beer? Stein. Translate.
You would have changed his name, I'm sure.
Translate. English. I want English. No, I want German to English. Stein. He's called one brick. That's also funny. What about what is a large beer mug called in Germany? Stein. I like one beer.
What else?
The thing mug.
Yeah, yeah.
What do they call those big mugs at Oktoberfest?
Yeah.
That was another question.
So, do you know when he said that quote, make everything as simple as not simpler? He was shaving with soap instead of shaving cream, and somebody said, hey man, why don't you use shaving cream? He said, make everything as simple as possible, not simpler. That's the story. So that's AJAX. And we looked at that, we looked at, oh, a couple of little caveats. This is also from MDN. If you do not set header cache control to no cache, the browser will cache the response and never resubmit the request, making debugging challenging. You can also pin an always different additional get parameter, like a timestamp or random number. So cache can be an issue with AJAX. And if HTTP request variable is used globally, competing functions calling make requests may override each other, causing a race condition. So you might use closure to prevent that. So here's just some explanation of it, and I think we pretty much talked about all this stuff. So setting it equal to a function, and then the open deal. First parameter, second parameter. Third parameter is always true by default, so you don't need to include it in there, but that just basically makes it asynchronous. If you make it synchronous and you set that to false, then your program's going to wait, not go any further until there's a response from the server.
Again, it's a bad thing. JavaScript's single-threaded. Now your entire web browser is frozen until the response gets back.
Yeah, awesome.
Or at least the tab. I think most web browsers will at least separate the tabs.
And then send, you could put, like, if you're making a request, it's null. Like, hey, get me this data. But if you're sending data, you dump the data in there. So that's where the data goes. That's just all MDN documentation. App Engine and AJAX. So how would we do that entire deal? I'm like transitioning here in how lectures go. Like PowerPoint slides aren't quite as awesome as just having it in web browser. I don't know why it keeps saying you're wanting to move this. So how would we do App Engine and AJAX? And data store. Like, that's a cool challenge. And it took me a couple of hours. So, using Julian Schmidt's router. Whoa, that's some homework. App Engine, AJAX, Julian Schmidt's router. We are now off the ski trails we've been on. We're going cross-country through the powder. We're cutting our new trail. So here's the Julian Schmidt router set up in a struct. Hey, here's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So show index is the first deal. Let's look at that. And it just redirects to profile. And so profile, show profile is the next deal. Show profile, parse a template, execute the template, not passing in any data. Okay. Well, let's go look at the template. Oh, I can't do that with templates.
It just thinks of it as plain text. So
I feel like I just was like, wait, it's broken. Let's go look at the template. I don't have any define up there. There's my CSS. So that's for the styling. Here's the body and the form. So name. So what's the difference between name and ID in HTML? That's a good confusing point. Like, why would I have name and ID? That's kind of nuts.
We can have like OID.
And they're the exact same thing.
To access that.
So name is kind of like when you want to get to the value for the form's been submitted. I want to get that value. It keys off of name. ID is like I want to target this with JavaScript. ID or CSS.
So ID is an HTML general thing for just identifying the node, so you can get to it later with JavaScript or whatever. Whereas name is what's the name of this value that we're going to be sending in this form to somewhere else.
Wow, you're awesome, Daniel. I love the way you, the precision with which you can articulate stuff. Code Talk! Welcome back to Code Talk. Sorry. We'll keep it serious. So here we have, and then we have our script. And we got our AJAX. So we have get profile. Yeah, get a new XH, X and blah, blah, blah. Do a new AJAX deal. So new XML HTTP request. I'm calling it XHR this time. And open it. So we're going to do a get to this path. So when we do that get to that path, API profile right here, get means this is going to run. When that runs, new key, profile, user email, right? So they logged in, has logged in, so that's all available to us through App Engine. So we could get to their email. And then we create a variable called profile of type profile, and we get that record and we dump all the contents into there. And then if error is not nil, so if there is an error, then we're just going to set profile email equal to whatever their session email is, App Engine session email. And then we do a new encoder and encode. And new encoder is the response, and we're encoding the profile. So this is going back as the response. So we've made a request from the client with AJAX. This chunk of code ran, right? And we're responding to the client, sending back encoded as JSON, right? The profile. And so if there was no profile in the data store, we just encoded the email. That's it. So that's what that does. You need a second? Good? Okay. And then we send that off. And when something changes, when the ready state changes, and instead of calling a function, I just kind of did an anonymous function right here, which goes to there. Okay. So when something changes, run this function, and if ready state equals 4, you could do triple equals, which means it really, really, really equals in JavaScript.
Yeah, in JavaScript with just 2 equals, you can use it. You can put a it could be a string for. It will automatically convert. 3 equals means no, this is actually an integer 4.
And you can see I'm a sloppy programmer because I said, to hell with HTTP 200. Right? Like, is a fine response. I'm just
well,
like...
Your server's not going to send anything back besides 200.
Yeah.
Your one case of an error, you simply fill it out with something else and say 200.
Yeah. Right. I actually thought that through. And then I get my response text, but that's JSON, right? So I need to parse that, and that gives me unparsed JSON or just text. It's going to give me an object,
gives
right?
you a JavaScript object.
JavaScript object. And now I have that object, and I get email, last name, first name, age, and I'm saying give me the thing on my web page which has the ID of email. That's right. Here, ID email. So it gets that. And when I get the ID of email, the value of that, and value is like what is it set to, is going to be equal to this. So it's populating my form, right? So it populates my
that
form.
JSON.parse is the whole reason why JSON is so popular for communicating, is when you use AJAX, Go's got its encoder nice and ready to make your data into JSON, and then JavaScript's got a nice JSON.parse function that changes it back into an object on the JavaScript side. Meaning that it's basically 1, maybe 2 lines on either end to convert to and from JSON, which makes it a lot easier to communicate.
Yeah, I left web programming when XML came on the scene. I was like, this looks confusing.
Especially with some of the schema stuff you have to do for XML.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is, I could just teach the intro classes. I'll do that.
Yeah. Luckily, XML is dead.
So then down here, get profile, that's beginning of my script tag. And then I have profile form, document query selector, profile form, profile on submit, function event, prevent default. So what's all that do? So we have, where else is that used? Profile form is just right there. So we're doing document query selector, profile form. So get this whole form. And on submit, so for that form, when they're submitted, this function, and you can have events in functions. I'm not totally sure how to explain that in JavaScript. How would you say that?
So the event handler function takes in an optional. You can optionally tell it that it takes in an argument, and that argument will be details about the event that occurred.
So here's the event handler. or that's the event listener on submit. What would you call that? Event listener?
Yeah.
On submit. And here's the event handler. And this, if we were to look at that, it's going to say, hey, it needs to be set to a function or something. I'm not going anywhere with that.
It's JavaScript.
It doesn't bring anything up.
JavaScript is dynamically typed. You can stick whatever you want in there as long as it's callable.
And so I could with that event, I could say prevent default. And that basically means that prevent the default submission. So instead of submitting this like back to a URL, like whatever the action would have been in my form, right? Action equals handle form submission, right? So now I'd go to that path at my URL instead of submitting to the default. And if I didn't specify action and just be at like whatever page this page is at, so that'd be slash. When you hit the submit button, we're not going to submit the form to a URL. Instead, we're going to listen for that submit button, and all of that function is right here. Right? So when somebody clicks on submit, don't submit back to the server. Instead, run this AJAX. And we're going to get document query selector, last name, first name, email, age, the values of each of those, and set them equal to variables. This is all on the client in JavaScript. So getting the values of each field in the form. And then do a new XML HTTP request. And we're going to post this time to API profile. And we're going to send JSON and stringify all of our JSON stuff. So it's turn it into JSON. Right? So we're going to send that all over, and then we're going to say get profile. We're going to run get profile again, which is this. And the first time this all runs, the first thing it does is get the profile. But then after you've submitted, you submit, and then it gets your profile again. So it's not the best functionality because you're going to submit and then just see your form with all your data in it. You'll be like, wow, did I really submit? Like maybe should print out you submitted, right? But you could kind of see, like just at its root level, basic level, AJAX at work. We're taking things from the client, sending them to the server, getting things from the server, sending them back to the client.
So the advantage here for your submitting to prevent the default will reload the entire page at whatever URL you sent it. So with this AJAX, you can prevent that and just say, oh, send this, but stay on the page. We can do our own. We know how to handle the results back that we may get.
So this is really like some of the things we did at boot camp. I probably won't be able to find this quickly. I think GitHub will be a better place to look for it. So like, what am I searching for? And yeah, I'm just going to look this way. Inside JavaScript, somewhere in here, we did things like this. Right, where it's like as you type, it's sending the information on each key entry. It's sending that to the server. This is what you've typed, and the server's sending back suggestions of what you might be wanting to, of what you might be searching for. So that's AJAX right there. Best places to take a vacation, a honeymoon, a road trip, a cruise. Right? So as I type, I am getting so hot, fat, married, old, stronger. I'm getting more forgetful, sweating, freckles, sleep moles, suggestions. It runs out of suggestions. That's AJAX. That's pretty cool. And that wouldn't be possible with page reloads, right? So it saves you the page reload. But it also should be used only as a feature for enhancement. It shouldn't be core functionality. So there's
unless using Angular.
Unless you're using Angular, then that's just the way it is.
That's what Angular does.
There's different philosophies of building, right? Graceful degradation is the ability of a computer, machine, electronic system, or network to maintain limited functionality when a large portion of it has been destroyed or rendered inoperative. I really like the way they describe that.
So most web browsers use graceful degradation. You can skip the majority of an HTML document, and the web browser will still be able to draw what it can figure out.
So you want your web page to be able to work as straight HTML. That's it. Only HTML, my web page works. HTML with CSS, my web page works. HTML with CSS and JavaScript, my web page works. But I could strip away any of those levels, and my user still gets functionality that's workable. So that's graceful degradation. And sometimes people refer to that as progressive enhancement. And if you look into it enough, people start splitting hairs over the difference between progressive enhancement and graceful degradation. It's like looking at it from looking at the same thing from I want it to fall apart well, I want it to build up well. Right? Progressive enhancement, start from HTML and then build up. For web design, it emphasizes accessibility, semantic HTML markup, and external style sheets and scripting technologies. That's not quite good to the definition. Blah 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 blah. And then the other thing you should be aware of is AMP. Accelerated Mobile Pages. October 7th, 2015. It's Google wanting to keep the web relevant, because a lot of people, web takes time, a little bit more time, there's a little bit of latency, and so they prefer their mobile apps. It's a little bit faster, pages load a little bit quicker. We need to keep the web relevant, so they introduced Accelerated Mobile Pages. It's brand new as of like yesterday, and so Accelerated Mobile Pages is basically bye-bye JavaScript. Do not rely on JavaScript. If you look at like the spec on it, so this is what, how things will load and the speed and everything when you do it this way. That's not really showing a load, it's showing a scroll. Show me a load. Slow as mud. Come on, show me a load. There we go, there's a load, right? Fast, just right there. I got slides of the relevant parts I wanted to show you of that. I put them all the way down at the bottom. Where does it say? One thing we realized early is that performance issues are caused by the integration of multiple JavaScript libraries, tools, embeds. This isn't saying JavaScript immediately leads to bad performance, but once arbitrary JavaScript is in play, most bets are off because anything could happen at any time, and it's hard to make any type of performance guarantee. With this in mind, we made the tough decision that AMP HTML documents would not include any author-written JavaScript, nor any third-party scripts. Like, that's huge right there, because so many people rely on JavaScript. So, based on that, just like you want to create web apps that are performant for people. For me, like, and graceful degradation or progressive enhancement, however you want to look at it. For me, you want to do HTML, CSS, really fast server side, right? And
Your server's running off of Go, which is fully compiled. The JavaScript's got to be interpreted, so it's going to be much slower.
Yeah. And then just think about, okay, what's the basic functionality I want to deliver? Not trying to make it too fancy, and deliver that basic functionality. So maybe you get 80%, but you lose that 20% of awesome splash and whistle with JavaScript, but because of that, your app is really fast, it's really usable. So I kind of would say, JavaScript's like the wax on the car. It's like the very last thing. Yeah, it's nice, but it's not needed. The main functionality is that car's got to drive. It's got to drive well. It's got to be comfortable. It's got to be nice to use. And if it's not perfectly shiny, that's okay.
A lot of big web pages like Stack Overflow and such, they'll still completely work if you got your scripts turned off. they'll usually stick like a notification saying, hey, there are a couple features that may not work. But for the most part, you can go around like Stack Overflow even with your scripts turned off. It'll all work.
So building it up from the ground up, like I have this little deal right here called Outline. And it's some sort of a Chrome plugin. So you can just look for HTML Outline Chrome in Chrome plugins. And when I click that, there's an outline of the document. So you want your HTML to be built in a structured way that a computer could look at it and really quickly kind of see, what is this page about? And that's built off of like your headings and things like that. So we got like 5 minutes left, or 8 minutes left, which I don't know if that's time for troubleshooting, but let's see if we can find one and wrap our heads around it. Anybody have any questions or thoughts? I had a really nice unfinished one here somewhere.
Data store.
Is it data store? Oh, it's in 2, huh? Query ancestor queries. Let's see if we can figure this out in 8 minutes.